Chapter 58. Blue. Kara has set up a round of pillows and blankets on the floor of the living room. There's a steaming mug in the woman's hands, and the boy is tucked down on the couch with a heavy quilt and a steaming mug of his own. Judging from the smell in the kitchen, my prediction seems to be right. There is definitely food cooking. A fact made even more apparent as my master comes into the room bearing a wide tray with several plates stacked on it. "Oh, you're back!" Master smiles as he realizes that we've returned. He's got his hair precariously tied up, half falling down into his face as he sets the tray down and starts passing out plates. "You two sit down. Food's cooking, and I'll get you some tea." He retrieves the empty tray, sauntering back into the kitchen before anyone can say a word. Vanna's nails press into my arm where he's been using me to support himself. "That shit ain't normal," he hisses low in my ear, and I honestly can't tell if he's joking or not. I certainly wouldn't have thought it was normal a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, I couldn't have treated the thought of a mage practically bouncing up and down, serving 4 pets, as anything other than lunacy. Dot seems to be coming from the same headspace, as she simply gapes openly, eyes fixed on the last place Kara had been before he disappeared into the kitchen. "Definitely not normal," she says quietly, almost to herself, as she pulls her gaze back to her mug and takes a hesitant sip. "It might not be normal behavior, but he wants to set you at ease in the house," I try to explain. It took a long time for me to understand that these actions were not the result of some great underlying motive. Kara just acts this way. Still, I know how unsettling it must seem for people not used to his eccentricities. "That makes it sound like he's hiding something." Thana pokes my shoulders, though the prodding will make me reveal all of my master's hidden plans for them. "He's not... Look, he just wants you to feel safe. He wants you to know that it's different here." I try to make it sound like I'm not coming up with that on the spot, but the look on Thana's face tells me that I've missed the mark. "That's all well and good, but I don't know shit about this man, so I will keep my healthy skepticism, if you don't mind." Thana crosses his arms, giving me an incredulous look that would make me feel bad if I were hiding something from him, like he thinks I am. "Just sit down. He really does need to have a look at you. There's definitely some brain missing from in there." I acquiesce, unable to keep the small grin from my lips as Thana's cheeks go red at the repeated jabs at his injury. "Laugh all you want, but what do you really know about him?" He leans closer into my space, confident that he's trapped me in some logic puzzle, that I don't truly know the man that I'm placing so much trust in. "I know plenty." Well, maybe not plenty. My mind rushes as I try to put together all that I know about my master. I know that he has a family that he doesn't talk to. A larger one at that. He has younger siblings that he evidently cares for greatly, or at the very least looks back at fondly. I know his last name is Couture. I know he's 27 years old. I even know that it's going to be his birthday this weekend, and Shauna's going to take him out for the occasion, even though he claims he doesn't want to do anything special. I haven't even begun to process that fear. I don't want to be left alone again. But maybe it would do me some good. Give me a chance to sort everything out in my head before I mess up even more. All in all, it's actually a lot more than I'm used to knowing about my masters. I open my mouth to say as much when Thana pulls me to the ground with him. We settle on our knees as Kara comes back out of the kitchen with another set of steaming dishes and mugs. "All right, I've got enough for everyone, so just dig in." He smiles wide as he passes the plates and drinks out to each of us. It's almost entertaining to watch the familiar disbelief from the outside. The way their eyes widen at the bounty laid out before them and the jovial master who sees fit to sit on the floor and serve them. "Thank you, sir." Dot bobs her head in as much of a bow as she can manage from her seated position. "Oh, please don't thank me." Kara flushes. I didn't have a lot of notice, so it's probably not even very good." I mean, it's here and hot, so it's already better than I was expecting. Vanna cuts through any tension and draws Kara's eyes away from the nervous-looking bird. Unfortunately, the shift doesn't have the effect Thana was going for, as Dot just looks more nervous.
We don't mean to be a bother.
Dot rushes to soothe the situation, but Thana doesn't seem to be on the same page.
Yeah, surely you had other things to do tonight than take care of a couple of strays,
he drawls, popping a piece of fruit into his mouth. I don't know why he's trying to provoke an argument. He wasn't like this with me when we were downstairs. A part of me is worried that the head wound was more serious than he let on, but the bright shine and calculating look in his eyes makes me think better of that theory. He's testing the waters. He's trying to make Kara mad to see what he'll put up with. It's not uncommon to test your standing, but I'm confused as to why he's doing it. It's really only something you do within the first few days of having a new owner, testing boundaries to see just how much you can get away with. It's dangerous and reckless. I only tried it once, and I got my arm broken for my troubles.
No plans. I've already cleared my audience with a foreign power, so my evening was free for you guys.
Kara answers sarcastically, rolling his eyes and popping a grape into his mouth. I have to suppress my grin. Even though he says it like a joke, it is technically true. Thana just narrows his eyes, short tail twitching in agitation. He's obviously fishing. He wants Kara to give him the answer to a question he's not answering. When he's silenced by the apple slice in his mouth, it gives us all a moment where we can ignore the hostile intent behind his eyes. Dot is giving the room half of her attention. She's more focused on making sure that Uva drinks from his mug and takes small bites of the solid food. She's still on edge, tense and ready to flee in case things go wrong. But there's a hint of a smile that wasn't there before, as her child smiles up at her brightly. Uva is taking all of this much better than anyone else. He's been tucked into a fluffy throw blanket that nearly buries him with a wide pillow behind his back to help him sit up. His wings are puffed up like his hair, and I can see Dot's fingers twitch, probably wanting to smooth them back into place, but not wanting to offend her host. The toddler trills excitedly at his mother, not overly loud, but he can't contain the way his wings shuffle and the feathers puff out even more in his excitement. The mug he holds seems almost comically oversized in his hands as Dot tries to get him to rest the mug on his lap and take the bits of food she passes to him. I sneak a glance at my master. He doesn't seem perturbed by any of this. In fact, he almost looks amused. No one's really speaking, but there's noise and movement. There's a warmth that I hadn't realized was missing from the house. I'm used to bigger households, the kind with teams of servants that handle things together, where there's camaraderie and even playful competition sometimes. This house is nice and full of liberties that I'd never dreamed of. But I hadn't realized until now just how quiet it could be. With all of us together, it feels more alive. So, of course, Thana has to open his mouth and ruin the moment. He shoves a big spoonful of the meal into his mouth and smiles wide and fake.
Damn, you should open a restaurant, dude. This is really good.
Thana speaks, the same searching glint in his eyes.
I feel like it helps that you're hungry. My mom used to say even rocks taste good when you're hungry.
Kara gives Thana a crooked smile, thrown off, but not directly addressing his odd behavior.
Well, then, at least you're going to be a great medic.
Thana smiles up from his plate. I nearly glare over at him. I don't mind him fishing for an answer, but he's not even trying to be subtle about it. I've just gotten a chance to appreciate this piece. I don't want Thana to ruin it with his questions. Kara doesn't seem too put out by it, though.
I wouldn't make it as a medic, though I can't say I haven't considered the path before,
he answers with no trace of deception in his voice. I am surprised by that. I had thought he wanted to go into medicine, given how readily he's helped me and every other stray that's come to him with an issue. He's skilled at the trade, though I suppose I had assumed that was a passion of his that he was pursuing. There's a little prickle of fear in the back of my head at that revelation. Maybe I don't know my master as well as I thought I did.
You do a great job. What are you talking about?
Vanna presses. Kara just heaves a sigh like he's about to explain something very simple to a toddler for the 1000th time.
I don't have the mind for it, don't have the math, or much of anything that's required. I'm not exceptionally skilled at healing. I'm good at lighter magical healing, but a great deal more is required. The trick I did with Uva was a variation on a common storm mage spell, not healing. That's why I was worried it would hurt him. A healer could have done it without any risk.
He says it with a grimace, though it sounds more like it's directed inward than anywhere else.
You helped with the drink, with my head wound.
Vanna says it like an accusation, but Dot cuts him off.
And you helped me with my burn. You were very skilled, sir.
Her voice is quiet, but it does nothing to disguise her gratitude.
Those were all just first aid with a little bit of arcane assistance. That shit wouldn't pass an academy.
Master shakes his head, choosing to stare into his cup rather than address anyone else.
Well, then, what is it that you want to be your focus?
Vanna asks, just a shade away from the casual question he wants it to be.
I haven't picked one yet.
Master answers quickly, drawing up his shoulders and tone shifting immediately towards something less friendly and more defensive.
We don't have to pick for another year,
he adds quietly after a moment or two of silence. Unfortunately, these answers aren't enough for Vanna.
Well, what was your awakening then?
He blurts in a fit of exasperation.
Vanna!
I can't help the harshness of my voice.
No, that's fair. I had a quieter awakening than most.
Kara chuckles to himself.
I didn't know it was magic for the longest time. I just kept getting sick when I went outside with our gardener.
I loved being outside and all of the flowers and trees.
Well, the gardener found a plot that wasn't in direct view of the house, so I could play in it and plant whatever I wanted.
I loved the process of watching them grow, but every day I was tired and sore.
Imagine my surprise when the gardener had to sit me down and tell me that plants weren't supposed to germinate and flower in a day. You sank magic into making plants grow.
Vanna's ears twitch, and I can hear the disbelief in his voice.
Well, yeah. Nature is its own form of magic. It just takes some practice to not be overwhelmed. I didn't have the best grasp on mana control as a child, and I was sinking too much life energy into the natural process,
he explains with a shrug.
I don't get it.
Vanna shakes his head, confusion and disbelief still plain to see on his face.
Well,
Master cuts himself off, seemingly unable to find the right words. He fishes through the fruit plate for a couple of seconds before he finds what he's looking for. He holds up a seed that got left behind in all the cut pieces of fruit. Before I can ask, he closes his eyes, and the seed begins to rapidly bloom. A stem and leaves curl up from the small seed. The bloom happens rapidly. Curling spindles of roots wrap around his hand and begin to curl down his arm. A small tree begins to bloom. It stays small, even though it goes through the stages of maturity before our eyes. The bark of its trunk hardens and the leaves grow a darker green as tiny little flowers bud. They bloom and fall as fruit begins to form, growing to its natural size. The tree bows a little under the weight of the fruit as Kara opens his eyes, smiling at the product.
Well, I still got it. It just takes a bit of energy.
He chuckles, eyes bright.
Huh.
Vanna clicks his tongue against the roof of his mouth and plucks an apple from the tiny tree.
That is pretty cool.
Kara smirks at that, but moves his arm over to Dot and offers her an apple from his tree.
What about you, Dot? What's got you stuck hanging out with this one?
Kara nods over to Thana, but he's got his mouth too full of apple to make a proper retort.
My mistress bought me as a novelty.
Dot blushes, looking away to help Uva heft the mug.
I'm a fairly uncommon avian breed, especially around here. She didn't know I was pregnant at the time, and either my seller didn't know, or he didn't see fit to tell her. "Oh, I'm sorry," Kara mumbles, clearly ready to drop the subject altogether, but Dot continues over his hesitance. "It's all right. She lost interest with me long before Uva was born, and after, well, I was more a nuisance to her than anything. Uva was taken with fever this summer. I tried to keep him out of sight most of the time, but I wasn't free to watch over him at all times. In that haze, he tried to find me in the house. He walked in on the mistress having tea with a guest, and, well, that was the last straw. Apparently it was someone really important, and they were very put out by the sight of a sick pet wandering into their tea time. She kicked us out of her house, gave me a good lashing for the offense, too." She chuckles a bit, though it's humorless, and hugs her knees closer to her chest. "We've been on our own since then." I hide my face in my mug as my master says something encouraging that I miss, but it does have Dot looking a little brighter. "I can't imagine what that must have been like. Turned out of your house with a child in tow, and nowhere to go that would be safe. It's a nightmare that's trained into nearly every pet. Getting thrown out is meant to be a crueler form of being put down. It's slow and painful, rather than clinical and supposedly painless." "I've found a few things here and there," Dot continues at my master's prompting. "Been able to rent out a few of my more skilled services, dive through the bins to keep us fed. You'd be surprised how many people don't mind an exotic. I have an older collar I found in the trash. It's enough to fool most. I tell them that my owner is a merchant who allows the household staff to do odd jobs while he's traveling on contract," she admits sheepishly. "That's really clever." My master chuckles, nodding his head along with her story. "Well, it's getting harder to pull off. The ripped clothes and the poor hygiene aren't exactly markers of a pet who's well kept by a wealthy merchant. But we make do. It's hard, but there are a few safe places I have found where Uva can hide most of the day." She gestures to her worn shirt and frayed jacket before patting her son's knee where it's buried in the blanket around him. "Yes, Mama." Uva blinks tiredly into his half-empty cup. "Although now I realize that he might have been wandering around without my supervision during the day." She quirks an eyebrow and turns her attention more fully towards him, waiting for an explanation. Uva simply ducks his head and pulls up the blanket that's been provided for him, pressing his face into the soft fabric as though he can hide from his mother if he just can't see her. "Uva!" Dot speaks in a warning tone, and the little boy emerges from the blanket to reveal the dark blush that spread over his face. "I'm sorry, Mama. I was hungry, so I was looking for some food." His lower lip wobbles dangerously as he looks away from his mother, plucking at the edges of the blanket. I can't help but feel bad for him. Aside from everything else, the public dressing down from his mother is not something to be envious of. Still, I can't help but think he's lucky to have such a good mother. I'd never met mine, but there were plenty of families that wouldn't have protected their child like that. Pets who would have looked after their own safety before that of their offspring. "Baby." Dot brackets his face with her hands, forcing him to look up at her. "Why did you leave the safe alley that I left you in?" "You were worried. I thought that if I didn't want you to worry. If I could find food, then you wouldn't have to worry." He sniffles. "Darling." Dot opens her mouth to say something else, then closes it without adding anything. Masters manage to detangle the roots from his arm, watching the scene as it plays out. Thana's deep in his cup, seemingly trying to keep himself out of this. I certainly have nothing to add. I'm not unused to the concept of growing up fast. I'm no stranger to being forced into the intense calculus of what you have to do to survive. But seeing it from the outside is different than living it. Seeing all the same markers of the things that I've lived through as a child is
disturbing. I don't like the thought of this small child having to dig through the trash for food, worrying about his mother and trying to lessen the burden on her.
Have you ever been to the Port City Paralia?
My master's voice startles me out of my thoughts.
I actually did come through there. I was on a boat for a few months before a merchant thought he could do better with me than my ship.
She can't keep the distaste for the man from showing on her face.
You have your sea legs?
Master questions, seemingly genuinely surprised.
My breed is at home on the ocean.
Dot smirks, but her eyes are distant.
Uva's never seen the water, though. Did you like it?
Master asks.
Did I like being in my breed's natural habitat?
She repeats the question back a little incredulously.
I meant working on a boat.
Master clarifies.
Why?
She regards my master with cautious eyes. I don't blame her for suddenly wanting to clam up. Both Thana and I give my master an odd look. He's not usually one to press for answers, especially not for such oddly specific questions.
I have a friend. She has a ship, the Queen Lyria, and she owes me a favor. I'm sure she could find a place on her ship for you. It would be steady work.
He lets the idea settle for a moment, but Dot's cautious expression doesn't shift. That sounds lovely, but I can't just leave Uva for months at a time for an expedition. She answers, voice hard.
I'm sure she wouldn't mind such a sweet little boy, and it would be an incredible way for him to see the sea for the first time.
Master's smile doesn't dip at her hesitance.
What favor does this friend owe you that she would accept a pet with a toddler in tow as a deckhand?
Thana cuts in, bringing up a fairly good question. I've never heard of this ship. My master's never brought up any ties with the coast, or a ship and its captain.
She's never been able to refuse me, and I doubt she'd care that you have wings. Most of her papers don't end up in the wharf master's office, if you know what I mean. I promise you'd be safe with her among her crew. They're all one big family. Once you're in, stars save you because you are in forever. To be honest, the wings might even make her like you more, if it makes you a little more efficient than the rest of the riffraff she keeps on her vessel.
Kara explains.
It's been quite a while, but my wings did get me around pretty fast.
She rolls her shoulders, allowing her wings to flutter just a little bit with the movement.
I'm sure she'd love you. I can write you a letter to give to her if you want,
Kara offers.
All you need to do is ask for her ship, and they'll be able to get you to her.
The Queen Lyria, Dot parrots back, making sure she's got the name right.
That's the one.
Kara nods along.
What do you think, Uva?
Dot turns to her child, not quite able to keep the excitement out of her voice.
The water is where the fish come from, right?
Uva asks, as though it is the only thing that is important about the ocean. Still, it's impossible not to see his excitement rising at the prospect, his wings fluttering excitedly as he tries not to bounce up and down in his seat.
Can we go, Mama? Can we go?
All right.
She chuckles, flashing the first genuine smile I've seen on her since she's gotten here.
I suppose we have our heading then, don't we?
Yay!
Uva cheers, raising his mug aloft with a bright smile on his face. Settling that little issue, the rest of the meal passes without the tense atmosphere we had started with. Attention back firmly on the food, we switch to less contentious topics. It takes only a few minutes of stumbling before that bright and lively atmosphere is back. Thana continues to press, but it's less overt now. Something inside him probably settled or at least quieted by the offer that my master has made. We eat and drink, and too soon we find that it has become quite late in the evening. I go to help Master with the plates, but he just waves me off and gestures for me to stay with the group in the living room.
Your master, are you certain he's real?
Dot speaks with a tone almost like she's daydreaming.
I can guarantee you that the first few weeks,
I was sure that I'd been hit in the head and was dreaming this all up. I might have believed it, too, but I'm not this creative, I admit. Thana, for all his griping, stays silent, just sipping at the remains of his drink. He's already experienced my master's eccentricities once, but I can tell that it still hasn't prepared him for what's happened tonight.
Do you think he's telling the truth?
Uva startles me with the question. He's been boisterous throughout the night, taste-testing all the little treats Kara made, and the wide grin that threatened to split his face never seemed to wane. But now he looks startlingly serious. Even Dot seems surprised, though not quite as worried as I am, given the immediacy of his shift.
What do you mean, dear?
My ears twitch.
I'm not a deer, I'm a Coramath, he whines indignantly.
Cormorant, darling, but that's not what he was asking. Dot corrects him gently.
Is he telling the truth about his friend? Is he really gonna help my mama and me see the ocean?
He looks up at me with wide eyes that demand truth. I don't know about the ocean, the ship, or the friend my master claimed to have, but I do know one thing. My master promised. He doesn't break his promises. Uva nods solemnly, but dips his head to get at the last of the juice in his mug. The sweeter alternative to the medicinal-grade tea had been swapped out halfway through the meal, when he told Kara that he could stand no more of the bitter, almost salty medicine. When Master comes back, he's not empty-handed. A series of boxes and books are stacked under one arm, while his other hand simply holds a letter. I'm at just the right angle to see his curly letters, Captain June, and a wax seal I'm not familiar with before he hands it off to Dot. "Do you want us out?" Dot asks, her eyes flicking to where her son has managed to fall asleep, tangled in the borrowed blanket.
I think that wouldn't be the best idea. It's dark outside, and everyone knows that the streets are dangerous at night. I've even heard rumors that there have been some strays sighted in the neighborhood. Imagine that! Kara drawls sarcastically.
Thana snorts, unable to contain himself despite the openly contentious relationship he seems to be forming with my master.
Besides, you,
Kara rounds on Thana, pointing a finger at his nose,
are not allowed to sleep. What? Why?
Thana whines, the light of my master's joke gone from his eyes.
Head injuries are delicate things. We have to keep you up in case you have a concussion, just as a precaution. I've got books and games, but we've got to keep you up.
He says it like a doctor detailing a prescription, and Thana just nods sullenly, sorting through the boxes.
The rest of you should get some rest, though. Especially the little one. It's been a hell of a night on his system.
Kara smiles at the little lump on the couch. He does seem to have gotten ahead of me on that count. Dot chuckles as Uva snuggles a little more into the pillow, in his own little world.
Do you need any more pillows, blankets, anybody cold?
He asks, gaze sweeping over each of us, giving us a chance to speak up.
I'll take a jacket if you got it.
Thana pipes up after no one speaks.
Not that your cast-offs aren't incredibly comfortable and warm, but I can grab you a jacket. That's no trouble.
Kara rolls his eyes at Thana's barbs, and, true to his word, comes back a few minutes later with a soft jacket with a hood. It almost looks like Thana's old one, disregarding the wear and tear it had suffered with his lifestyle. My master takes a second with each of us. He checks over the patch of skin on Dot's upper arm that had been burned, but now shows no trace of the injury, and, according to Master, no trace of ill effects from that healing. He takes a bit longer with Thana, consulting a couple of books about what the best course of action might be to further treat or diagnose a problem. But all the advice he can glean leads him to the same treatment plan. Seal up the exterior wound and make sure they don't have a concussion. When he turns to me, I'm confused until he takes my hand, tracing his finger over the flecked damage that's spread over my palm. That healing is something relatively simple, a spell he's more familiar with. A spell that he used quite a bit as a kid when he and his brother got into trouble, he says. I wonder, idly, exactly how many times someone has to break glass and get cut before the spell becomes something of an essential. I wonder what he was like as a child, what his siblings are like. Healing's done, we are left to our own devices. Dot drops off first, curling up on the couch with her son and out like a light before the hour is up. I stay up for a while and participate in a couple of rounds of a simple board game, but it isn't long before I catch my eyes slipping closed. The warmth of the little afghan that I'd pulled around me, in combination with the lulling quiet, is overpowering in a way that I hadn't expected. It's soothing, and the game's far too dull to keep my attention in any way that matters. My thoughts come slow. There's just enough gentle activity around to provide a hum of background noise. It is nice, and far too easy to fall asleep to it. I catch myself dozing, my head lolling to the side and nearly hitting my master. I bite my cheek in frustration. He hasn't given me any order to stay up with him. Technically, there's nothing keeping me from falling asleep, but it does feel like failure in a way that I can't articulate. There's been so much this past week. So much that we've had to deal with, so much that we've had to overcome. Is it so bad that I ask for a simple win? All I want is to stay awake by my master's side, and yet that seems to be something that I will be denied by my own body's failings. I can feel the phantom ache in my body from the casting. It's more present now that I'm trying to force myself not to think about it. My body is still trying to recover, and that means unless there's something major that I need to accomplish, it wants to sleep. Blue? Master's voice breaks me out of my thoughts, and it takes far more effort than it should for me to turn and blink, facing him. His fingertips brush lightly through my hair, the touch so faint it's like he's not even there at all. I want to lean into it. I want to force him to run his fingers through my hair and pet me like he used to. Treat me like he used to before he realized I was this fragile little thing that couldn't survive his casting. I wonder if there's something else for me, if that's what he's planning, if he's going through that secret list of people he knows and places he's been, and he'll find something that vaguely fits my skill set, and he'll ship me off like Dot. It's far from the worst that could happen to me, but why does it make my stomach feel so unsteady? Kara's hand comes down on my head, not twining with my hair or scritching behind my ears. It's just gently pressing downward until I'm using his thigh as a pillow. Master? My voice is deep, scratchy, in a way that I'm unfamiliar with except for in the early mornings. Get some rest, Blue. His voice is kind and soft as he pats my head and moves a piece on the board game. I wish he'd pet me, but at least I know he'll still tolerate me snuggling up to him.